two battleground primary states go up. The blue wave didn't even show up, and the Florida governor's race goes racial before the day is out. Okay, so earlier this week we had two primaries. We had Florida and Arizona, which are actually real big because they're two battleground primary states. And what you saw was high turnout on both sides. And you had record-breaking midterms. So that just kind of shows how important this midterm election is and how both sides are actually viewing this. Now, if you just want to talk about voter turnout, the Republicans ended up winning. They got about 100 and 150,000 more votes than the Democrats did on their side. But the Democrats, a higher percentage of them turned out. So to me, this actually shows that although the Democrats are having more enthusiasm, they're just not showing up in the raw numbers. So to make up this deficit, it really limits where you can go. So as you have this never Trump kind of hate Trump core that's fueling this, and they're really coming out and voting, but if they're having high turnouts and not getting the number of votes that they need, then what you're really looking for is that independents are going to break towards them in the end. But this is where the problem lies, and this is why I think there's not going to be any blue wave. Because one, if you want to call it a blue wave, I guess a blue wave showed up and everybody lost. So there's not really going to end up being a blue wave in numbers. So, and the reason why I think this is happening and independents are not going to go for the Democratic challengers in the primaries, maybe like they normally would have, because what you're seeing here is in these battleground states in the middle of the country, you are getting these primaries between progressives and basically socialists, and you're getting moderate Democrats. Now, the moderate Democrats would appeal most broadly to independents, and the progressives get a little bit less. But I feel like the Democratic Socialists who are being nominated, like the soon-to-be, or the Democratic nominee for governor of Florida, he's a very left-wing Democratic Socialist. And even though they're trying to dress it up, you're in a battleground state that mostly votes Republicans for governor, and same with Arizona. So what you got was this plurality where all your middle-of-the-road Democrats who outvoted or had more votes through the two of them than the Democratic Socialist, but because he had the most votes of the three, then he ends up getting elected. So I think this is really going to end up hurting the Democrats in the November primaries, because in the battleground states, and this is key because you have 10 senators who Trump won their states, and now they're up for election that they were put in when Obama ran in 2012. So now you're going to have a Democratic Socialist trying to appeal to independents and middle of the road and disenfranchised Trump voters. And what I think you're really going to get is they're either going to stay home, or to be honest, Trump has more in common with independent voters than Democratic Socialists does. These blue collar Democrats that really kind of came out for him are going to come out, I think, in November, or not come out at all. The question is this actually going to be a referendum on Trump? So if Democrats hate Trump and the Republicans don't come out, then it is. If they both come out in huge numbers and one party barely squeaks it out, it really isn't, because Hillary made a mistake when she ran for president. She didn't go to these flyover states. She didn't really campaign on what her blue wall was. She just kind of stayed on the coast. She got her donations. She got her big crowd. She got the TV performances that she wanted. And then she ended up losing because she lost a lot of these places that she didn't care about. It's actually the same track that Rudy Giuliani lost, I think, back in 2008 when he was starting to run for the Republican primary. Now, the second interesting factor in this turns out to be is that, so Ron DeSantis, the Republican nominee for governor of Florida, the next morning while talking to Fox News, makes a statement of saying basically our state is going good and we don't need to monkey this up by electing a Democratic socialist and instigating socialist policies that are going to require high taxes. So, and let's be honest, you think a Republican would know by now when you're going up against a minority candidate not to say anything that could even be remotely construed as racism. So he says the word monkey, or he says the phrase monkey this up, which is a very common phrase, and you've seen a lot of videos of President Obama and pretty much everybody in the world saying this as just kind of proof that this has been said before. So what the media did was jump on monkey this up, and since the Democratic nominee is black, that it is turned into a racial epithet. And then later on in that day, also in the news with Fox News, and I think he also did the same phrase in CNN, where he said that this isn't a dog whistle, it's a bullhorn, that in the age of Trump, that racism is no longer dog whistles, it's bullhorns. And the problem is everybody already looked at this, and they kind of made up their mind. Basically, if you think Republicans are racist, then you thought it was racist. And if you thought the media was blowing a big fit about racism in the past and that Republicans aren't, that's kind of where you fell on this. And the problem with the media, and this is where the media is doing a disservice to the country, is that when actual racism happens, like these robocalls that we don't know how many people received it, but it's from the roadtopower.com or PAC, which is kind of funded by this white supremacy Nazi organization in Idaho. You know, they have a guy kind of talking like Gollum, but it is really heavy on the thick minority accent. And you hear jungle sounds in the background, and it's just this really horrible racist act. So what the media is now doing is they're trying to take this actual racism event and then trying to attach it to be honest, a make-believe fiction of a racism comment and talk about how racist this has all turned out to be. But this is where the media runs into the problem of fake news, and people just don't trust the media. Because if you look objectively at what Ron DeSantis said about, you know, the monkey this up statement, he wasn't being racist. He was just using a common phrase. So they take one part of a common phrase and say that he's being racist. So then an actual racist event happens a week later and nobody cares, but the media would then try to use this actual racist event to prove their non-racial event, and then people just get disgusted with the media. And we kind of get this climate that we're in today where people don't really trust the media, even if you're a Democrat, an independent, and a Republican. As you go down that scale, the trust for the media gets less and less and less. And Democrats being the most trusting of media, I think almost a majority of them don't even trust the media anymore. So this is kind of where we've ended up with all this. But still, your numbers are not showing a blue wave. In sheer numbers, they're just not. Now, the Democrats are getting high turnouts. And in places like New York and probably Minnesota and California and Washington and Oregon, you know, the typical blue states, let's go New Mexico, you're going to have really high turnout. And I think you're still going to see this, what I've been calling kind of the purifications of the party. That the socialists are really mad inside the Democratic Party and they're coming out in force and they're getting their candidates elected. And on the Republican side, it's almost completely go for Trump. Everybody who Trump nominates seems to be winning by huge parts, whether they're underdogs or favorites. They're just winning by huge margins. So apparently Trump's going to be doing a bunch of rallies, and the Democratic Socialists are really kind of pushing their candidate strong. But I think this is really going to leave the independent voters, although, you know, we hear this number of 20 to 40% of the country's independent voters. I've never actually believed that. I would have put it more past 10 to 15 because there's voting preferences. I think most independents probably don't vote most of the time or vote when they feel like it's an important election. So will they view this as an important election, and will they have more in common with, you know, kind of the socialist platform that the Democrats are putting forward, or the Republican platform, which is basically, I'm going to back Trump? So it's going to be this interesting kind of back and forth, but I still don't see evidence for a blue wave. And it's not that the blue wave won't happen in sheer numbers, like Hillary beat Trump by 3 million votes. But if you look at it, it all had to do with the amount of the votes she got on the coast. You know, you won 70% in California, and that's pretty much what she won by, was the amount she won by in California is what she won by in the case. So outside of California, she basically ran even in the whole rest of the country. And that's with states like New York and Texas. And, you know, so I've been focusing more on battleground states. And if you look at the battleground states, Republicans have been outvoting the Democrats, while also having a fewer percentage of their people show up. So this is really showing me that I think the Democrats are going to be in real trouble, because most of their Senate seats are up in the Democrat or in Republican states, red states that Trump won by a lot. Most of their Senate seats are up in that. Now the whole Congress is up for election. You know, it's their 2 years, and everybody goes up. Now this is where it gets interesting, because where Hillary Clinton neglected the middle of the country and the suburbians, and she really focused on heavy blue areas to get out kind of that vote, the Republicans and Democrats are not going to be making that mistake. All these elections are local. They're going to be talking about local issues. So it's really hard to say what a local election is going to have on a national scale, but it can have national implications. And if one side is more motivated than the other, then you get the kind of this national wave that has little to do with local politics. So we'll see which way this is going, but right now I'm just not seeing evidence for a blue wave. And you saw Trump's approval numbers really rising in the black community and almost every community except kind of I think his disapproval numbers have actually, or his approval numbers have been falling amongst college-educated women. But, you know, this is also something that we heard pre-election, and then it turned out that he won women. And do I think, even if the black community is supporting Trump more, let's just say double at 20% of what they normally do, not this 40% number that I heard, and not this 3% number that ABC's kind of weird poll. So, and Trump called that a suppression poll, which I think he's really got right on this. And, you know, you see kind of this trend of the president where his approval ratings are going up and almost across the board. And then all of a sudden this one outlier poll comes out where his approval ratings like 10 or 15 points lower than any other poll. You know, any gains plus anybody that elected him were way down. And when you dug into the numbers, I think it was somewhere between 15 and 20% of the participants, which were just random adults identified as Republicans. So essentially you had an entire Democratic poll, and they released these numbers and saying, see, you know, Trump's approval numbers are really bad. And this is what they call a suppression poll, to think your candidate is unpopular, that he has no chance, so there's no point in going out and vote. So this kind of tells me that, you know, at least the media is getting a little bit worried about November, even though they aren't saying it. And they've already started saying, at the beginning of the blue wave, they said they were going to win the Senate back. Now they've pretty much written off the Senate, and we're getting into a fight over how many seats they're going to win and will it be enough in the House. So I think the goal for the Democrats is to get the House and just try to shut down the government. But I think they're starting to look at the math of the geography and the districts and starting to come up a little short. So I'm all interested in how this is going. Go ahead and like this page and go ahead and share this video. Subscribe when you want to get the latest videos. Go ahead and check out our Patreon page so we can give you better content in the future. And everybody have a good day and look forward to more videos and checking out the blue wave that's not